2025 is ushering in a new era of the state legislature here in Georgia. 4 elected members, 2 in the state House and 2 in the state Senate, joining us for a conversation about the topics that matter most to you, the voter. Republican State Senator Drew Echols joining us. He is serving his first term. Democrat State Senator Jason Estevez serving his second term. Republican State Representative Scott Hilton serving his third term. And Democrat State Representative Jasmine Clark joining us serving her fourth term. Thank you all so much for being here. You are here because the voters decided to send you to the Gold Dome. So we appreciate you coming to 11 Alive to talk about upcoming session. So let's get started here. In the new legislative session, we'll likely see a push for new goals ahead of 2025, as well as bringing up some unfinished business from last session. So for each of you, this is open. Anyone can start. What is your top priority for this term?
Well, I'm new at this. I'm going to play the new guy card right out the gate. But one of the things that we've been hearing, I think we're going to get to work on, and I'm excited that we're not just going to sit around the first week or so not doing anything. I think we're going to get to work on disaster relief early in session. And it's tragic what's happened all over South and East Georgia. I'm in the ag sector. That's what I do. I farm, and I've been down there, and it's horrific what's happened. And we've got to work together to help our neighbors.
We can go down the line here. We'll go with you, Representative Clark.
So I would say there are a couple of bills that passed in some way, shape, form, or fashion, but didn't quite make it all the way to the finish line. I'll name 3 that I can think of. First, I'll start with a bill that I sponsored or co-sponsored, and that is a bill that would modernize sex education in the state of Georgia. Passed a committee, and it's the furthest it's gotten since I've been elected. As you said, this is my 4th term, so hopefully we can get it a little bit further down the road. As well, we saw finally a vote on Medicaid expansion. Again, it didn't quite get as far as we would like for it to go, but it got further than we've ever seen it go before. And I think the people of Georgia are really asking for this. And then the third thing I will say is we actually saw a bill that would incentivize people safely storing their guns or getting training when they purchase a firearm, and they would get a tax credit for it. This did pass the House overwhelmingly. There was very little pushback on this. And so while it did not get to the governor's desk, I am hoping that we can continue to move in that direction so that we can really focus on safer communities from gun violence.
And that is on my question list, so we will definitely get back to that. Representative Hilton.
Awesome, Faith. It's an honor to join you on this panel. We've got big priorities heading into 2025, the first of which is addressing inflation, the rising costs of goods for consumers, and really putting more money back in their pockets through reducing taxes. So you'll see additional relief there. For me, I serve on the Education Committee. That's a big priority for me. We spend almost half our budget on education, so things like school safety, literacy, and continuing to support our teachers and parents. So education, and then as my colleague mentioned, Hurricane Helene relief. We still have a lot of folks suffering in South Georgia and other parts of the state. We've got to get resources down to them.
So Senator Estevez, what is your top priority for this term?
Yeah, Faith, so Hurricane Helene relief is on all of our minds, and we'll certainly keep that as a top priority until it gets done. But I'll continue to work on what I've worked on my entire time in the Senate, which is bringing relief to homeowners and to everyday hardworking Georgians, try to find ways to reduce costs. I was proud last year to pass a bill to help reduce costs for Atlanta seniors and their homeowner bills that they were receiving. And I look forward to finding ways to do that. I'm also going to be focused as a former public school teacher on public education. And Representative Hilton talked about some of the education priorities that he has, and I look forward to working with him on that. I also think we need to continue to increase access to health care. We have 500,000 Georgians who don't have health insurance right now, and that's an issue, as Representative Clark just talked about, is something that we have to continue to put pressure on our state leaders to prioritize access to health care. And the last, for me, as a small business owner, I know that my friend Senator Echols is a small business owner as well as a farmer. We have to continue to support and grow our small businesses. They employ half of our state's residents. And we need to see small businesses be supported in many of the same ways that we see our big corporations be supported in the state. So we have to prioritize our small businesses.
Mr. Eccles, I want to put the spotlight on you for a little bit because you're our only freshman here on the panel. You join a group of freshman lawmakers this year looking to usher in new visions and goals for the state and your constituents. As a freshman, what criticism do you have for your peers who have previously been in the legislature, so your peers right here on the panel, and what do you hope can be done differently?
Well, so as a small business owner, it's different. It's different from the outside looking in. And I understand that, and I also understand that a freshman senator is not going to change the world. So, I think that a lot of times the optics, that a lot of things don't get done early in the session. My business can't operate like that. We've heard about small business from Senator Estevez as well. No small business operates like that. And we also, we think small businessmen and women think farther out. I oftentimes talk about, when I plant peach trees, it takes 4 years for those trees to grow. Well, I have to have tractors, and I have to have coolers, and I have to have baskets at the end of those 4 years. I can't just punt it to year number 5. I've got to be ready to go. So I think there's a lot of frustration with the pace of how government works. I campaigned hard back during the spring, and a gentleman called me the day of the election, and he said that he just wanted me to wear my work boots to Atlanta. He said, you've got my support if you wear your work boots to Atlanta. Just go down there and go to work. So, I'm not saying that folks are lazy. I'm just saying the optics of it, there's a lot of moving parts that the public don't get to see, but we need to go hard. We've got 40 days. We need to go hard, get things done, serve the folks, and come back to the House, to our respective districts.
Thank you so much. I want to ask you all about this. This is an open question. And the constituents, the voters we heard from throughout the election and even before it, the cost of living, the price of goods, one of the number one issues driving them to vote in this last election. That was among the top issues, right? When can Georgians start to see those prices go down here in Georgia? This is an open question. Anybody can take it.
Well, I think Georgia's done a fantastic job under the leadership of Governor Kemp, pushing back against some of the policies that we've seen come out of D.C. over the last 4 years, which have resulted in higher prices and higher costs. And what we've done here in Georgia is we've managed our budget well, we've managed the state well, and we actually have a surplus of funds that we can now return back to the taxpayer to give them valuable relief. We've taken action to reduce the state income tax. We've taken action to reduce excess regulation and burdensome laws there. And so all of that has made Georgia a very friendly place to live, work, raise a family, and play. And we've seen the result of that as businesses have fled other states that are driving up costs and relocated here to Georgia. We've been the beneficiary of that.
And businesses are coming to Georgia. You're correct. We have seen some gas price relief at certain points of the year. But really kind of getting back to that question, people are worried about the cost of groceries. And this is not just a Georgia problem, right? This is a nationwide problem. Do you guys, is there any timeline for people who might be watching?
Well, look, I think at the end of the day, we have to invest in Georgians. As a state government, we have to do more to invest in our people. And when I think about the server at my restaurant and the fact that she has to worry about the cost of childcare, she has to worry about how to get to and from work, she has to worry about Wall Street buying up her home in her neighborhood and increasing rent. She has to worry about whether she has access to health care. All these things fit into how people think about the cost of living in the state. Mm-hmm. And until we have true investment in our communities and in our people, people will continue to feel the pressure. And I encourage us as a legislature, I encourage state leaders to really focus on investing dollars in the systems that people rely on, whether it's on healthcare, whether it's investing in public education, whether it's investing in protecting our housing stock. Yeah. We have to continue to invest dollars in people versus what I feel like we've been doing, which is underinvesting and then relying on tax cuts. Tax cuts only go so far because what ultimately happens is the burden of all the increased costs from the lack of investment falls on those same taxpayers.
Do you all agree with that, with the tax cuts?
I would say this. I think that there are people, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, that will acknowledge that the price of eggs, I'll just use eggs because that's come up a lot over the last year. The price of eggs is probably not going to drop down to below $1. Like, that's not going to happen. And I think that is just economics 101. Inflation is down, and the United States has done an amazing job of getting inflation down. However, that does not always translate to the prices going down. And we have to actually think about, like, what is the reason why? And a lot of that is there are a lot of people who have made a lot of money, even though inflation went down, their profits went way up. But what I will say is I agree with Senator Estevez. When we think about the cost of living, it's not just groceries. It is how much does daycare cost, and can I afford to put my children in daycare so that I can work? And then if I do have a job, can I afford to get there? And then when I work at this job and I get my paycheck, does that paycheck go far enough for rent and childcare and groceries and everything else? So it's holistic. And then, God forbid, I get sick or I have an accident. Can I afford to go to the doctor? These are some of the things that when I was knocking on doors on the campaign trail, and since I've been elected, these are the things that are always top of mind for people in Georgia. It's not just about the price of eggs. It is about the price of life, living in general.
No, just getting back to the question, and I'll let you answer this, but just collectively, is it yes or no? Like, do you think in this next session we're going to see those prices drop for Georgia?
I think that there's two things that I'll mention that for farmers, the percent of the dollar on food that we're getting right now is less than it's been in the past 40 years.
For those farmers?
For farmers.
Okay.
For eggs, for bread, milk, whatever it is, cheese,
Meaning
whatever
the
it
grocery
is.
stores can get it for less as well?
Middlemen are making more money. And a lot of those prices are, it's federal regs. Some of them are state regs. We've got to enable, in particular, the ag industry. And I'm very, again, I'm a farmer. We've got to try to make these folks in South and East Georgia whole. There's going to be farms that go out of business, wiped off the map. If we don't do something with disaster relief. So that inflation piece, when it comes to our food, it's a debacle. There's a lot of moving parts there that we could probably talk about it all night and still not come up with the exact answer. Leadership in the Senate has stepped up, and child care is a priority. I know it's a priority. Senator Strickland led a study committee throughout the summer and just wrapped up this fall, just a couple weeks ago, and released his findings, I think last week. Our party, we've heard loud and clear, that's a problem.
Okay.
Your average Georgian can't afford child care. Listen, I'm a very simple-minded guy, very simple-minded Republican. I'm for strong families, safe families, and government to get out of my way. I think that solves some of our inflation problems.
So it sounds like you guys are working on it then.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you straight, it's no mystery what caused inflation. It was reckless spending coming out of Washington, D.C. that drove up prices. Now that we've got a change in administration, I think you're going to see that spigot turned off, and that's going to help drive down prices for nationwide. We're certainly doing our part here in Georgia, not only cutting taxes, but investing in teachers with historic pay raises, public safety, those that keep us safe, all-time fully funded education at one of its highest levels ever. So the beauty of how we've managed the state is we've been able to cut taxes while also investing in the future of Georgia.
Just to push back on that a bit, we know that inflation was not caused by spending. In fact, a lot of the spending that we've seen Governor Kemp tout as a state came through federal funding. So if there was any spending at the federal level, it was actually spent down at the state level, which is why we see some of the record surpluses that we see. But more importantly, I do want to make it clear I'm not saying that there's something wrong with tax cuts. The way we're doing tax cuts is what's the issue. More than 60 to 70% of the benefit from the tax cuts that we've seen over the last several years have gone to people who make, and companies that make over $500,000. The average Georgian, the average small business is not profiting and not making $500,000. The vast majority of us are making well below that. So the average worker is going to see a $50 savings in their taxes, whereas the multi-million-dollar corporation is going to see tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings. We have to make sure that when we're cutting taxes, we are incentivizing our small businesses, that we're incentivizing that mother who is concerned about childcare. We should have an earned income tax credit in this state. We are one of the few states that does not have an earned income tax credit. And if we want our working families to really feel a tax cut, then we would direct the vast majority of those dollars to those working families, and we have not seen that.
And I just want to give the last word to you guys, and then we're going to move on from this topic. Go ahead.
Yeah, again, I respectfully, the way we've done or handled tax cuts has been very smart. I mean, a gas tax, that impacts everybody regardless of income. When you reduce the income tax rate, again, that helps everyone across the board. When you give a flat $500 rebate to a family of four, that impacts everybody. In fact, it probably benefits those more on the lower income than the higher income. And so we've done it in a very equitable way across the board so that everyone is lifted up here in the state.
Representative Clark, I'll address this to you. After the horrific mass shooting at Appalachian High School, House Speaker John Burns put out a proposal on gun legislation tackling mental health, weapons detection systems, increased penalties for terroristic threats, and incentives for safe storage. Is this proposal enough to keep students safe? And do you believe that some sort of gun legislation can pass in this next session?
So I'm going to answer the second part of your question first, because we did see at least some sort of gun legislation pass the House in the last legislative session, and I truly hope that we can see that get over the finish line as far as incentivizing safe storage. I like my Speaker of the House's plan. I don't think that it goes far enough, and here's the reason why. So I'm a mom. I send my daughter to the local public school every morning, and I pick her up from school after school. She plays basketball. I feel this issue at heart, because every time I send my daughter to school, I really, truly hope I don't get that alert, that text message, that robocall that says there's been an incident at your school, more information to come, the children will be taken to another place, whatever, how that plays out. I don't want to have to live that. I don't want anyone in our communities, in our state, in our country, I don't want us to have to live that. And so while I do think that we should tackle mental health, I think that sometimes we use mental health as a reason to not do other things. We need to tackle mental health, and we need to get a hold on making sure that people who should not have guns in their possession do not have guns. That's children. That is people who have been shown to not be mentally stable enough to own a gun. I truly think that if you own a gun, it should not even be controversial to say you should have training on that gun and you should have a way to safely store that gun. I don't see why that's controversial at all. I think more needs to be done, because a lot of times what we see is people who are getting access to these guns, they're not getting it from some shadowy guy in an alley in the back of his trunk. That's not where they're coming from. They're coming from inside the house. They're coming from getting access to something that they shouldn't have had access to.
And I want to stop you right there. We did see that was the case in Appalachia. Senator Echols, I know that you're going to be new to this group coming in, but I do know that you really campaigned on protecting the Second Amendment. Those who also believe in their Second Amendment right say that there's an issue here and something needs to be done. What are your thoughts on this?
So first off, I would commend these legislators here. Our schools are getting roughly $45,000 a year, probably the best $45,000 that they get per year for school safety. And I'm for raising that. There's not a dollar figure that you can put on our kids' safety. I have a 21-year-old daughter at the University of Georgia who sent a heart-wrenching text message to her mom the day the young lady was killed in Athens. I have a 16-year-old son with Down syndrome who, Shelley and I laughed as we came down the road down here and we're talking about some of these issues. He got locked out of his school about a month ago in the rain. He had gone out the wrong door and his badge didn't let him back in the door. Their school safety worked. Unfortunately for Cohen, in the rain, the school safety worked right there.
That door was locked.
That door was locked.
Yeah.
That's not always the case. You know, another point, and I keep on hitting the ag industry, but outside of public safety, the industry that I live in every day, and I love, I depend on guns. There's guns in my truck right now, locked in my truck at my house, but there's 2 guns in my truck, varmints, sometimes safety, snakes, those type things. I'm not for infringing on those rights. We got to keep guns out of bad people's hands, clearly, but I'm not for infringing on the rights of law-abiding citizens.
And we hear that a lot anytime something like this happens. And a big criticism that we hear from those everyday Georgians is that nothing's happening because you have these 2 headbutting, don't take away my gun rights. It's not the gun, it's the person. And it almost seems like maybe just one issue can fix it, but then what it seems like you guys are saying is that it's a collection of issues that might have to solve this issue.
Well, and Faith, that's why I was so proud to be the lead sponsor on the firearm safety bill in the House, a bipartisan effort to bring both sides together to say, okay, we can solve this together. And I was excited to see that pass the House. I'd love to see us try to tackle that again. But I'll tell you, as the vice chairman of the House Education Committee, me, the chairman Irwin, speaker of the House, we've done a listening tour all across the state to put together a pretty comprehensive set of solutions to address school safety. One of the big recurring themes we hear is, Scott, we get these students in our school, we have no idea what's going on in their background, where they're coming from. So I think we've got to lean into technology and address data sharing between agencies, between schools, so that when a child shows up, like what happened here in Georgia, that they know what that student is dealing with, some of the struggles, and they can address it head on to keep that school safe. So that's going to be, again, a big theme for us this upcoming session.
Senator Estes, I'll let you weigh in.
Yeah, I think what you're hearing from my colleagues in the House is that the Senate is holding up some of their gun legislation. And they're being cordial, they won't say that, but I can tell you that Senate leadership has to do more to ensure that some of these common sense gun bills pass. And here's the thing, Faith, is that the vast majority of Georgians agree that you can protect the Second Amendment while at the same time doing some common sense things like ensuring that red flag laws are in place so that the people who are not supposed to get guns, the bad guys, don't get guns. They also agree with safely storing weapons and requiring adults to store weapons so that their children don't grab those before they go to school. There are common sense things that we should be doing, but politics gets in the way.
I'd argue, though, that not everybody believes that a law should be required for that safe storage. Am I correct?
I think that people in Texas agree. I think that people across the country agree. And when you poll Georgians, 80+% of Georgians agree. And for me, this is common sense, but it's being blocked by the politics. If we can put the politics aside and put everyday Georgians first, we would knock this out in the first week. And some of that falls on the Senate. And I think I just wanted to call that out to make it clear that we need to be doing more in the Senate to pass some of these common sense gun laws.
I'll give my Republican colleagues a moment to respond before we move on.
I mean, I'm in the House, and naturally there tends to be some conflict there, but I found them to be, on the Senate side, great partners in passing legislation that's benefited all Georgians. As you know, it's a 40-day session. We unfortunately can't get to absolutely everything that we want to. That's why we pick it back up again. Important measures and yeah, I guess a House member coming in defense of the Senate here, I think they've been a great partner for us, and I look forward to getting back and working with them to get this over the
Are you
finish
going to
line.
get some emails after saying that?
He had to do that. That was a good save. Good save.
Well, Rep. Hilton, my next question is for you. You helped lead the charge of the school voucher program that goes into effect 2025. How do you respond to critics who argue this can cause more harm than good? Families who say, you know, $6,000 isn't enough for me to get my kid into a nice school.
Yeah. I think it provides an essential lifeline to folks who are trapped in failing schools. And I was talking to someone who runs a school today up in the Rome area. Their annual tuition is right around $10,000, $11,000. So, you know, we live in the metro area here where maybe $6,000 doesn't go all that far, but in some parts of the state, it really does. And yeah, I think it empowers parents, students by giving them, here's your tax dollars back. You figure out the best solution for you. I'm a dad of 3 kids, and each one of them learns totally different and needs different resources. And so I am so proud of what we've done there to give them a lifeline to get out of schools that have all the funding they need, but just don't have good leadership to be able to run effectively and teach these students. And so we've help those schools out as much as we can, but I'm a big believer in that we need to give more choice to parents in their child's education. It's just the right thing to do.
I would definitely push back on the idea that a quote failing school is failing because of leadership. I think that a lot of times when you look at the schools that are on this list that they say are failing schools, what you see is a lack of resources. And you can say, oh, well, we gave them enough money, but I think when you ask those schools, they need resources for different things than maybe other schools might need. We have a lot of schools in Gwinnett County that have a huge population of students where English is not their first language. And so when you talk about a failing school, a lot of time that is because there's not enough resources to make sure that we get those students up to par to be able to take the same tests as the students where English is their first language. At the same time, I would also argue that we are holding public schools to a standard that people can take this $6,000 to a private school that is not being upheld, that is not being held to any type of standard. And there is no metrics that these private schools have to abide by in order to be eligible to receive the $6,000. So basically, you could take $6,000 from a quote failing school and give it to another quote failing school by all metrics. The only difference is one of those schools is being held to a standard and the other one is not, because it is private and the government is not telling them what to do or what they need to do.
Do you plan to take this on in session?
Absolutely. I was a huge opponent of the school vouchers. I do not believe that it serves Georgians. I believe that it takes money out of the pot that could go to actually helping schools that need it. I think we actually need to take a look at more equitable funding. Georgia is one of the few states in the nation that does not consider poverty in its quality basic education formula. And so a lot of times what happens is places that have high property tax revenue coming in, they have the benefit. I live in a place where we have foundations that get money from donations from wealthy people, and they use that money to boost their school and give them things that other schools that don't have foundations can't do. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about equitability. So, equity. And so when I get back in session, this is definitely something that's on the top of mind. If we say that we care about all Georgians and the future of all Georgians, we truly need to invest in all students and not pick winners and losers.
Well, and I think that's the biggest point, is that 90% of our students in the state attend public schools. So if we are really trying to reach every Georgian possible, then we would be coming up with solutions that reach every Georgian. And the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of Georgians across this state don't have access to a private school. Many of the private schools, especially here in Metro Atlanta, have long wait lists, especially the high quality ones. So what we should be doing is focusing on school systems that serve the vast majority of our kids and figure out what we should be investing in to give every child an opportunity. At the end of the day, what we should be focused on is ensuring that regardless of where you live, you have access to a high quality public school. And that ideal is not foreign, it's bipartisan. We've seen similar voucher programs rejected in Oklahoma and Kentucky. Those are not Democratic states, those are solid red states. And they rejected the voucher program with large numbers. And it's because it's taking away money that could go to the vast majority of children and using it to benefit a few.
I just want to let you respond, and then we're going to move on to
Yeah, and I think a misnomer you've heard here is that it takes away money, when the opposite is actually true. The program is only funded if public schools, are fully funded. And so this idea that somehow it takes away from public education is just not true. I think we both agree an opportunity for students. It's just, what does that opportunity look like? I thought it was interesting the mention that private schools have waiting lists. It's because there is such a hunger and a thirst to have a different alternative option for people's students. And that's what we believe an opportunity for everyone, and a variety of what that opportunity looks like can be a variety of formats. And so I'm excited about it. We've kind of toe in the door. We're going to see how the program works and then kind of grow it from there based on, and that's what we've seen from other Republican and Democrat states, is that once the program starts, it's successful and it grows. And I think that's what's going to happen here in Georgia.
Thank you.
I was going to just call out and just give folks a preview of what's going to happen later this year, which is the program was initially intended to benefit about 22,000 people, is what they thought the eligibility was going to be. And the new commission that was formed under the law came out and made 400,000 people eligible. So I think what you will see is there will be a push by some legislators to expand the budget for the program. And it may not be taking away money now, but like what we see in Arizona literally had to cut their state budget to allot money for their voucher program. They had to take money away from infrastructure, they had to take money away from public education in order to fund their voucher program. I'm fighting hard to make sure that Georgia doesn't get there.
I do want to get to another big topic that was really key in this last election. That's the topic of immigration. Immigration was a key issue, like I said, during the election. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle agree that the immigration system in our country is broken and needs work. Can the state come together to pass legislation that helps to solve the recognized problem that we have with immigration, while also protecting the lives of everyday Georgians contributing to our communities, including those who may be undocumented? This is an open question. Anyone can take it.
Well, look, I think the state can't solve the immigration crisis in this country. I think that falls on Congress and it falls on the President of the United States. And the reality is that earlier this year there was a bipartisan bill, earlier last year, there was a bipartisan bill that was under consideration, and President Trump on the campaign trail told Republicans not to support it, and as a result that did not pass. Now, would that federal bill would that have solved all the issues? No, but it would have taken us a ways down the path of solving that issue. What we can do at the state level is making sure that not only are we protecting Georgians, but we're protecting people that are here, ensuring that folks are going to school, that they're being put to work, and that they're contributing to the state. And as a state with lots of different industries, we have to make sure that we are seen as a welcoming state, because we don't want to see Georgia become one of those states where immigrants, undocumented or documented, stay away from because they don't feel welcome.
I want to let Senator Echols weigh in on this.
So this issue, I've been talking about this for 20 some odd years, and nothing's changed. And it doesn't matter if it, Republican leadership in these administrations in DC or Democrat. But here's what I can tell you is that the ag industry leans heavily, especially in Georgia, on an H-2A program, bringing in guest workers on visas. What happens with an influx of illegals? Not only are these folks competing with American domestic workers for jobs, they're also competing with other workers who came here on a visa undercutting wages, things like that. We've got to stop that. We've got to protect the people who are here legally to do work. Like, that's priority number one. We got to secure that border. I'm pretty sure there was a referendum on the southern border last month. That's what I heard. There was a referendum on inflation and a referendum on the border. We've got to close the border. We've got to stop the bleeding. We got to know who's here. We've got to get the criminals out of here. Heck with, a couple slaps on the wrist and we turn you loose. You're committing crimes here. You're here illegally. You're committing crimes here. You need to go home.
Open question, anybody can answer. Respond.
I'd agree with my Senate colleague. I mean, I think last month's election was an indictment on President Biden's border policies and national Democrats and even Georgia Democrats who've supported those policies. Georgia's not a border state, but unfortunately we've become one because of those policies, and we've seen it right here in our backyard with the death of a poor woman in Athens. And so the Georgia legislature took action with legislation last cycle where we said if you were a sheriff here in the state and you have a prisoner who is not here legally, you've got to report that. We've got sheriffs in the state who are not doing that and not abiding by that law. And so absolutely, our number one priority in government is to keep our communities safe. And so if we've got folks who are in this country, in this state, who we don't know who they are, what their background is, that's not good. And so fortunately, it seems like we've got federal partners now who will address that at a national level, and we're certainly here to support them locally.
And at a state level, I know that you all have been focusing on those who have committed crimes, but what about those who have not committed crimes and might have been living here for decades? They did not follow the proper protocols to come, as some would say, legally, but they have been contributing to society. Maybe they're trying to get their citizenship right now.
I think it falls on Congress. They've been kicking the can down the road way too long, and they need to address this. I represent one of the most diverse communities here in the state. A lot of folks who have come through and done it the right way, but a lot of folks haven't. And it's a real complicated issue that I think Congress needs to take up and address in a real way.
So at the federal level, you think?
I think so. I'm not going to say how old I am on the air. I'm just not going to go there.
21.
But I'm going to say that I've been alive long enough to know that there is no political will to really address this because, as Senator Eccles said, it doesn't matter whether it's a Democrat in the presidency or a Republican in the presidency. It seems to be no matter what happens, whenever we try to reach a deal, it gets curtailed. And that's what we recently saw in the last year, where there was a bipartisan deal. And let's be clear, this bipartisan deal was a compromise. There were people on both sides of this bipartisan deal that didn't like what they, had to give up in this process. But even the Border Patrol themselves said, we like this, we want this, and that was sabotaged. And so again, it's like we keep seeing the same thing happening over and over, where there doesn't actually seem to be anyone that actually wants to solve it because it is good political fodder during campaigns. It is a fun thing to campaign on, and you get to choose a good enemy that everyone can rail against. And in this case, it was the immigrant population.
So can anything be done at the state level, Representative?
So here's what I'll say. In the Higher Education Committee, we have seen a bill that would recognize that DACA students or DACA recipients, many of them who have been here since before they were even in school. They have grown up in the Georgia public school system. They've gone to school here. We have invested in them because they have been here. They, by all intents and purposes, by all definitions, are residents of Georgia, but when they apply to college, they are not considered in state because of their DACA status. And so we've seen a bill that says, we've already invested in them. Why would we let that intelligence, that innovation, and that investment go to another state that is more friendly just because of their immigration status? And so we had a bill that just said we would give them in-state tuition just like every other Georgia resident if they qualified just like every other Georgia resident. We can't even seem to get that passed, but I'm hoping that maybe we can find a way to to get that over the finish line, because that is something that to me doesn't seem like it should be controversial. Not only that, there were actual universities in our state that were coming and begging for this legislation because enrollment is down in our higher education system. And these schools are like, we want students. We're losing eligible students, kids who live in our neighborhood, kids that shop at our restaurants or shop at our stores and eat at our restaurants. They're leaving because it's too expensive for them to continue their education here in the state of Georgia. Okay. As far as just like the immigration quote crisis or whatever you would like to call it, I don't think there's any one solution. And I think that, as everyone on the panel has said, this is something that needs to be handled at the federal level.
And you guys agree with that at the federal level? Yeah. Well, I want to move on to my final question for tonight. As you all start your new term, a new president will start his term. President-elect Trump will be starting his second term here in the U.S. He campaigned heavily on bringing many decisions back to the states and responsibilities that were once at the federal level back to the states. So what are you all preparing for in this new administration? We can go down the line, starting with you, Senator Echols.
Start on the other end.
Want to start on that?
He's like,
I'm the new guy. Let me throw the card one more time.
Well, look, I think what the reality is, given the federal administration, is that the vast majority of the policy is happening at the state level. The legislature, the governor, other statewide office holders matter more now than ever before. And we have to do all that we can to make sure that we're prioritizing everyday hardworking Georgians and making sure that from a policy perspective, we have them at the center of each one of our decisions. And that's certainly what I'm going to be advocating for in this legislative session. And to the extent something happens at the federal level, then I will weigh that against the interests of my constituents and either come out for or against whatever's happening. But my focus is going to be on Georgia and what we can do to cut costs for everyday Georgians and what we can do to improve their lives.
Representative Hilton.
Yeah, I'm just so excited about the change in mindset. You know, our founding fathers didn't believe in kind of all the power being held in D.C. It ought to be in the states. And so I'm a big believer in government closest to the people is the best form of government. And so excited to see what this next 4 years holds. I was talking to a manufacturer here in the state just yesterday, and he was saying, Scott, the amount of regulations I'm dealing with right now coming from D.C. are unbearable, and it's causing things to be, in my business, more expensive and more onerous. And so I think cutting that is going to be, you talk about inflation, I mean, we're going to see some real relief just taking the amount of regulation that's coming out of D.C. right now, getting rid of that. I'm excited to see what happens in education. They've talked about kind of streamlining the Department of Education. That's going to release so much more money that's going to come back in the form of grants here to us that we can decide, you know, from an education standpoint, what works best, what model is best here in Georgia. So, yeah, excited to see, again, that kind of change in mindset. It really puts more responsibility on us to really focus in on what do Georgians need and how can we help them the most. And so I'm excited for the next couple of years.
Representative Clark.
well, I think what we can all agree on this panel is that we want to do what's best for Georgians. And I think the differences is how we view what's best for Georgians and how we view the path to doing what's best for Georgians. But what I will say is, as we see a lot more things be punted to the state level, I really truly hope that those in leadership positions, my colleagues in the General Assembly, really truly recognize the charge that we have to make sure that we are doing what's best for the people. We just talked about regulations, but I want to be clear, a lot of times without regulation, the people are the ones who suffer. Especially, think about the biolab in Conyers that just had the fire and the effects of that. I think that there definitely needs to be consumer protection top of mind when we start punching things down to the state. And then when it comes to education, we just talked about, I think Democrats and Republicans have very different visions for how we should fund education in the state of Georgia. And so those would be some of my concerns, and hopefully we can come to the table and find a way to make sure that we're doing right by the majority of our children in the state. And so that would be my hope.
All right, we've made it to our lone freshman on the panel, Senator Eccles.
Well, what I'm hearing is very much a Georgia first priority, I think, from my colleagues right here. Everyday Georgians, they look at Washington, D.C. as dysfunctional. They can't get anything done. And I don't know what's been said, right here in downtown Atlanta. I'm more familiar with the Gainesville-Hall County area, but you just hear it and you see it on social media and you hear it on the news, and people are tired of it. So I'm kind of excited that power is going to come back to the state. Nobody knows Georgians like Georgians. And we know the needs. We know the needs of the communities. We know the industries that do well in Georgia. The regulatory environment. It's the climate, the people. I look forward to working hard for this state and keeping it the number one place to do business, raise a family, and live, work, and play, so to speak.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all so much for giving up so much of your time to little old us here on the Georgia Vote. We hope that you will come back as you embark on your journeys for this new session. So we do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.